Hello everybody, welcome to Snyder's Inc. And today we got top 5 unknowns, and this is 5 missing people who vanished without a trace. And we gonna get right into this, ladies and gentlemen. Hit the like button, hit subscribe button, comment what you think down below. Let's go.
Whenever someone goes missing, there's usually some indication, however small it may be, of where they may have gone or what may have happened to them. These clues are often enough to track them down, whether they're still alive or not. But this isn't always the case. Sometimes people go missing, and despite the best efforts of investigators, family members, and friends as well as search teams, there are no clues to be found, no leads to follow, and the investigation is left to go cold, leaving everyone involved with only questions as to what may have become of the missing person. Number 5. Having someone you know and love go missing can be a harrowing and stressful experience, but it must be even more unsettling to find out that an entire town has vanished without a trace, and it's not as uncommon as one might think. The most famous example of this must be the Roanoke colony, which disappeared in August of 1590. It's a strange tale that's left us baffled for centuries, and it's unlikely that we will ever find further answers to solve the mystery. It all began when a group of settlers, about 115 altogether, relocated from England to Roanoke Island in the US. After establishing their community, their leader, John White, decided that he would make his way back to England in order to restock the colony's dwindling supplies. He would, however, get stuck in England thanks to the war between Spain and England, and he would only make his way back to Roanoke 3 years later. But upon his arrival, he was dismayed at what he found. The entire colony had disappeared without a trace, and the only clue that he could find was the word Croatoan, which had been carved into a wooden post. Despite searching high and low, neither White nor the authorities ever found any trace of the colony's inhabitants, and we can only speculate as to what may have happened. There are theories that
It's very interesting to think that, 3 years later, you can come back still 3 years later with food and water. They're dead no matter, even if they stay there, they would be dead. You would have just found a load of bodies just all around the place. But the fact that they vanished without a trace, without one side, they just, all of them, 100-something people, gone. Not one sight of them. That is insane. That is actually insane. Because there's no explanation on how you... There's nothing that explains how you do that. How does 100-some people in an island, remote island, how's 100 people go missing? It's insane. Did they, all of them, all 100 of them jump in the water and try to swim to somewhere and then all just die?
tribe living on the island of Croatoan may have attacked the colony, and either ended everyone's lives or taken them back to the island with them. Others believe that the colony members may have become desperate when White didn't return, and so they decided to sail back to England but never made it back.
Yep.
This is a well-known case that pretty much everyone agrees will never make any further progress.
No, because there's nothing to give you answers unless you just find 100 bodies of them. Unless you find all their bodies, you will never know the answer to this case. It will be forever unknown.
But there is another similar mystery that also needs solving, which is the disappearance of the town of Urkhammer, which was situated in Iowa. We're uncertain just how well known the town of Urkhammer was, since there's no record of when the town was established or who may have lived there. But an article that was published in the Clarion Sun-Telegraph in 1929 assures us that it really did exist, despite the doubts of many who have heard the tale. The article reported that a pilot flew over the town. The town seemed completely deserted. One would imagine that he saw empty buildings, cars that had been abandoned by their owners, and businesses that had been boarded up, but this wasn't the case. The areas where buildings once stood were now completely empty, with no sign that anyone had ever built there. Where there should have been roads, there was nothing but open land and fields, and it was as if the entire town had been swallowed up into nothingness, or as if it was never really there to begin with. But as strange as that sounds, things were about to get a whole lot weirder. A man who was passing through the area decided to stop over in Urkhammer just a week after the aerial photographs were taken. But he was even more unsuccessful than the pilot was. The man arrived in Urkhammer just in time, as his car was about to run out of gas. He stopped at a gas station in town and filled his gas tank, thankful that he could continue on with his journey. But as soon as he drove out of town, he would also fall victim to the strangeness of Urkhammer. He had only driven 2 miles out of town when his car began to sputter, and eventually it came to a full stop after it had run out of gas. He made up his mind to confront the owner of the gas station who had clearly ripped him off, putting in no gas while gladly accepting the man's money. He had no choice but to walk the 2 miles back to town, but after 2 hours of retracing his steps, he had still not made it back to town, despite being able to see some of the buildings in the distance, which he found very strange and frustrating. Another motorist eventually passed him on the road, and recognizing that he may be in trouble, shared some of the gas from his car's tank, and the man was free to go on his way. But the ordeal had such a lasting impact on him that he needed psychiatric care and would end up receiving treatment at a sanatorium for a short while. Another...
What? So this guy went to this town, got in a gas station, filled up gas, took the money, gave it to an owner, drove off with there being no gas in his car, then walked for 2 hours and never once found this town. This town doesn't actually exist. This town never existed. This sounds like an urban tale. This does not sound real. There's no way this is actually real. I don't believe it.
Version of this tale states that the traveler actually stopped outside of Urkhammer, where he found the gas station to be desolate and abandoned. He stated that it seemed as though the station and the nearby shops had been abandoned for a long time with no signs of life anywhere. He decided to report the matter to the people of Urkhammer, which was about 3 miles away according to the signs next to the road. But no matter how far or fast he drove, he could never find the town. He had covered about 4 miles but never saw any indication that he was getting closer to the town, and he was rapidly running out of gas. He decided to return to the gas station, but he was overwhelmed by a feeling of loss, and he became certain that the town had suffered some terrible fate. Many people have attempted to solve this mystery by looking for the town, and some have even claimed that they were able to find it, but reported that the streets were completely empty, as was the case with the motorist, not a single soul in sight. Then there's the tale of a group of farm families that was moving from Illinois to California, and along their route they decided to stop outside of Urkhammer to set up camp. They were low on supplies, and so 2 men from the group were told to head into town for fresh stock. But they returned empty-handed with a strange story. They claimed they had reached the town, but when they attempted to walk into the general store, they found that their feet passed right through the building's front steps, as if it were a hologram. Unwilling to believe their fantastical tale, a larger...
What? He went, listen, we went to go get the food, listen, our feet, we couldn't do it. It's actually a hologram town. I mean, that would explain a lot. That's why people could try. Some people see it and some people don't, right? If they want you to see it, they'll press the button so you will see it. If you don't want to see it, you don't end up seeing it. Yeah, that's very bizarre. Some hologram town. I don't know why anyone would have that. Very, very odd.
Their group was sent to town, but they encountered the same problem, and the group, now thoroughly unsettled, decided to move on after reporting the strange incident to the Iowa State Police, who immediately investigated. They went to Urkhammer's sheriff's office, but when they attempted to open the door, their hands passed right through, just as it happened to the previous group. Many believe the tale of Urkhammer to be a complete fabrication, but a woman wrote to the editor of the Clarion Sun Telegraph to say that she worked as a school teacher in Urkhammer and she was unimpressed with the strange tale about the town. But despite this, the town has still never been found, and it's unlikely that we will ever know what happened to Urkhammer or its inhabitants. That is, if it ever existed in the first place.
I'm about to say, because this seems fake. This seems like a fake tale. There's no way this is an actual real town. I don't believe it.
Number 4. People have been known to go missing in the blink of an eye, with people reporting seeing someone right in front of them and they turn away for a few seconds only to find that the person they were looking at has completely disappeared when they look back, never to be found. These cases are almost impossible to explain, let alone solve, and it all becomes all the more frustrating when no sign of the missing person is ever found. Usually, investigators would come across at least some of their belongings like a wallet, a phone, or an item of their clothing. But there have been many reported cases where not a single clue was left behind. What must be even more disconcerting and confusing, however, is if someone disappears while they're in full view of onlookers, seemingly blinking out of existence with no explanation or indication of what had happened. This is exactly what happened in the strange disappearance of David Lang, a farmer who lived near Gallatin, Tennessee in 1880. David was married to Emma, and they had 2 children, namely George, who was 8 years old, and Sarah, who was...
Is this an actual picture of him? Because if that's the case, who the fuck is just standing here? Is that Hat Man? Is Hat Man standing there? Hat Man back around? Hat Man. Like, why is someone standing there? What the hell?
Was 11 at the time. The only other occupants on the farm were the family's servants, but they would receive visits from friends very often. And it's this fact that makes this story so strange, since it wasn't just David's family who witnessed a very bizarre incident, but their friends as well. On the 23rd of September of that year, David was relaxing on his farmhouse's porch since it was a scorching hot summer. George and Sarah were playing on the lawn in front of the house while Emma was inside. Given the unrelenting heat, George became concerned that his horses may be affected, and he decided to move them to a shadier area, just as Emma came walking out of the house onto the porch. At the same time, they noticed that Judge August Peck, who was a friend of the family, was approaching the farm on his horse-drawn buggy, together with his brother-in-law, and the 2 children became excited, since Peck usually arrived with a few presents. David also noticed the buggy, and after finishing his task, he turned back to the house, giving a wave to his friend as he did so. But then something truly bizarre and inexplicable happened that has not been explained to this day. Most reports say that David took about 6 steps back towards the house when his foot seemed to strike something on the ground that caused him to stumble and fall, which was obviously worrisome to the onlookers. But what caused them real concern was the fact that as he hit the ground, he completely disappeared into thin air in full view of everyone present. Emma let out a scream, and everyone ran over to the spot where they'd last seen David, but there was nothing and no one to be seen. At first, they thought he might be playing a prank on them, and that he was hidden behind something in the field, but despite searching every inch of the area where David was, they were unable to find him. By now, Emma and the children were in a state of panic, and they alerted their neighbors who arrived at the farm in quick time to aid in the search. The entire family searched multiple times, with people stomping their feet on the ground in an effort to find a crevice or a hole that David may have fallen into, but to no avail. Fearing that something might
I don't know how to explain that. I mean, he walks, falls down, and then just vanishes outside, never to be seen again. Like, he'd have to fall into the dirt, wouldn't he? He'd have to fall into the ground, into the earth. Because I don't know how you explain. There's no other way to explain that, unless he got abducted by goddamn aliens. That's the only other explanation I got.
Might happen to one of the children. Emma called for the county surveyor to check the farm's grounds, but he too was unable to find anything wrong, stating that the farm's grounds were good and solid and that there were no areas that were deemed dangerous. In fact, he found that bedrock ran just a few feet under the field, and so it could have been impossible for a cave-in to occur that would have allowed David to be swallowed whole. Emma became sick with worry and confusion, and she eventually spent most of her time sick in bed. When the following year rolled around, George and Sarah noticed that the grass in the area where David went missing was dying, in contrast to the surrounding field. The yellowing grass formed a circle of about 15 feet around the area. Before they could report the strange find to their mother, though, they heard David's voice calling for help, though he was nowhere to be seen, and it seemed as though he was calling from another dimension. This would happen on a few more occasions, but as time went by, David's calls for help grew even fainter, and eventually they stopped completely. George noticed that the horses refused to go anywhere near the circle of yellowed grass, and on one occasion, he and Sarah decided to conduct an experiment. They caught a cricket and threw it into the strange patch of grass. The cricket immediately stopped chirping and hopped out of the circle where it started chirping again. They also noticed that no other insects or animals ever entered the circle, as if they were avoiding it at all costs. Emma never got over the disappearance of her husband, and she eventually decided to relocate, allowing Judge Peck to rent the farm out, as long as the field where David was last seen was left as it was until she passed away. It's impossible to ascertain what really happened to David, and hence there are many theories on the subject.
I have nothing, except like abducted by aliens, or something like that. I don't have an explanation to explain what happened to this guy. That is very bizarre, very weird. I literally have no explanation. I got nothing. Nothing at all.
One of which is that he somehow crossed paths with a doorway to another dimension, which he then fell into. Some people think that David was abducted by extraterrestrials, but this wouldn't explain why his family was able to hear his voice for months after he disappeared. Then there are those who believe that the entire story is a piece of fiction. But one man named Stuart Palmer strongly disagrees. Palmer received a first-hand account of the event from Sarah Lang, David's daughter, and she would add that she made contact with a spiritual medium after her mother passed away, and she was told that her mother was also still searching for David in the afterlife. One last interesting detail that she added was that after the farm was sold, the new owner wanted to have the field where David disappeared plowed, but no matter how many times he did so, the circle of grass would always grow back in the exact same spot. Number 3.
It's almost like that circle of grass will not fully disappear until whatever happened to David is found. Like whatever happened to him is found. Until then, that grass will always come back. That place will always be there until he is found.
Many parents find it hard when their children head off to college, as it is in most cases the first time that their child will be living away from home. But it must be absolutely devastating to find out that one of your children has gone missing while away from college, which is what happened to a woman named Mary Carpenter in Denton, Texas.
Mary Virginia Carpenter.
Mary was born in Texarkana, Texas in 1927. And she showed remarkable development as a baby, and she started walking much earlier than expected, and her mother would have to resort to telling her that large dogs patrolled the streets outside their house, just to keep her from leaving their yard unsupervised. At 3 years old, she became ill with influenza, and given the state of medicine at the time, she was left to fight through the illness by herself, and when she finally got better, doctors found that the illness had caused an infection in her right hip, and this had a lasting effect, as one of her legs was now shorter than the other. Although she was a smart girl, Virginia never excelled at school because of her limp. She was rather shy and reserved, but
Interesting. So, she never succeeded in school academically because of a hip, her infection with a hip. It's bizarre. Because I get maybe she couldn't do athletics, like she couldn't do, that would be too difficult. But I would think she'd be like very good academically. But maybe I was wrong.
But she did try out for the majorettes, and against everyone's expectation, she made the squad. She would eventually graduate from Arkansas High in 1944, after which she continued her education at the University of Arkansas, after she decided that she wanted to pursue a career as a journalist. But after a year of studying, she decided to alter her course towards becoming a lab technician. But before she could do so, her mother fell ill, and she fell in love with a man named Mac, who worked at the hospital where her mother was being cared for. They became engaged, but Virginia would end the relationship shortly before the wedding, as their personalities started to clash. She then attended Texas.
Yep, all happen. Personalities will clash. If you two, because it can go either way. There'll be two different personalities, but the two personalities complement each other, and that's why the marriage and relationship works. Or in this case, it'll be two different personalities that's just straight clash with each other, and there's nothing. It's like a rock meeting the rock, and it's there's no communication, no nothing, and it just completely falls through.
Arcana Junior College, after which she planned to move to the Texas State College for Women in Denton. When the day arrived for Virginia to leave for college on the 1st of June 1948, Virginia's mother asked if she could drive her to the campus in her car, but Virginia said that she would rather take the train, and she made it to the train station just in time. 6 hours later, she had arrived in Denton, and she, along with the woman called Marjorie Webster, who she met on the train, hailed a taxi that was being driven by a man named Edgar Zachary. Zachary dropped Marjorie off at the Fitzgerald dorms, but Virginia realized that she left her suitcase at the train station, and she paid Zachary 75 cents to take her back to collect it. Marjorie offered to accompany her, but Virginia insisted that she go alone. Upon arrival back at the station, though, she was unable to find her luggage, and she was told by an employee named Mr. Buttrell that it would be arriving on a later train. Zachary offered to pick the luggage up for her the next morning, and Virginia agreed, signing the back of the claim ticket so that he could do so. From here, all we have to go on are witness statements, the first being from Zachary, who told investigators that he drove Virginia to Brackenridge Hall at the college, and as they arrived, he noticed a light-colored convertible parked outside. He added that Virginia then got out of the taxi and walked over to the convertible, where she had a conversation with the two men who were standing next to it. When asked to describe the men, he told investigators that one was tall and the other was short and stocky. He got the impression that Virginia and the two men knew each other, and he left the luggage that she did have with her on the curb, since the two men had offered to carry it for her. He then got back into his taxi and drove away. Some reports would later state that a guard at the dorm saw Virginia getting into the convertible with the two men, but police investigators later refuted this claim. Zachary would return the next day with Virginia's trunk, and he left it on the curb as she asked, but 2 days later, it was still in the same spot, and it was eventually taken to the college's office. It wasn't until 3 days later, when Kenny Branham, who was Virginia's boyfriend at the time, failed to get a hold of her, that anyone started to suspect that something was wrong. Branham contacted Virginia's mother to tell her that he couldn't get in touch with her, and Mrs. Carpenter started to become concerned. She contacted...
That makes sense. But so it took 5 days, 4 days? 4 or 5 days before anyone decided that her not getting a hold of anyone was concerning? I mean, yes, they justify it by she's in college. So, she's living a life, probably having a good time, probably, hanging out with friends, probably fine. But I feel like there's a reason to be concerned there.
Contacted the college to get more details, but she was told that Virginia never enrolled for her classes, and so she decided to contact Virginia's friends to hear if they had seen her, but to no avail. She then reported Virginia as missing to the Denton Police Department, but she was told to go to bed and that they would take a look at the case the following day.
It's midnight, 10 a.m. at night. Listen, I can't get a hold of my daughter. It's been 6 days. We can't get a hold of her. We need your help. She's clearly missing. And I was like, ma'am, it's 10 at night. You need to go to bed. Just go to bed, ma'am. Listen, go to bed. Go sit there. Go, ma'am, we are asking you to go to sleep. Talk to us in the morning. Call us in the morning. We don't care. No, we don't care right now. It's 10 at night. We're not going to deal with this shit. Call us in the morning and we'll go to bed.
Mrs. Carpenter, however, decided to try.
Ma'am, go to bed, and if you wake up and she's still missing, then let us know.
Traveled to Denton with her friend Lucille Bailey, and they were soon joined by other members of their family and some of Virginia's friends. Searches were carried out by airplanes and boats. The nearby wooded areas were searched by foot, as were any storm drains, wells, outbuildings, and rural areas, but no one was able to find any trace of Virginia. Drivers of light-colored convertibles were questioned, but investigators came up empty-handed, and it started to feel as though Virginia had disappeared into thin air. Farmers and hunters in the area were informed of Virginia's disappearance and told to be on the lookout for any shallow graves, and Virginia's photo was sent to police departments all over Texas. When her trunk that had been delivered to the campus was searched, it offered no clues as to where she may be, and a reward of $1,368 was offered for any information leading to her whereabouts. Zachary agreed to take a...
I would say that was, that isn't much, but anyways, I guess back in the day, that part was worth a lot. $1,000 then, probably way more than that now. I'm not good at figuring that part out, but again, so, yeah, my original thought, was just stupid.
Polygraph test, which he passed, and investigators were satisfied that he wasn't involved in her disappearance. But it would then come to light that Virginia did indeed know someone who owned a cream-colored convertible, but there was no evidence tying them to the case. A few small leads came in, and they were all followed up on, but nothing came of it, and Virginia remained missing. A gas station attendant in Aubrey, Texas, contacted the...
I bet that, like, that person, right, does, but I mean, if you can't prove anything, there's nothing you can do, really. You can't get, like, you can't arrest them for the fact they own a light-colored convertible. Can't arrest someone for that. So if you get proof, so the guy probably does own, that she does know, probably could have had something to do with it, but no explanation could be given.
The police to report that he had seen Virginia sitting in a yellow convertible with two men and another woman 2 days after she had disappeared, but the car was never tracked down. Another sighting came from a DeQueen bus station ticket attendant, who stated that she saw Virginia at the station where she nervously waited for someone while asking about hotels in the area. Investigators showed her Virginia's photo, and she confirmed that that was the woman she saw. She eventually met up with a man of around 25 years old, and they left the bus station together. But just a few minutes after they had left, the woman received a phone call from someone asking for Virginia Carpenter. Investigators contacted hotels in the area, but they were never able to find anyone who had seen Virginia. And later, the witness from the bus station stated that she was unsure if she really did recognize Virginia from the photo that was shown to her. A few more sightings were reported, but none were of any use to investigators, and Virginia's case grew cold. After 7 years of investigation, it was decided that she be legally declared deceased. In 1959, investigators found a wooden box that contained the remains of a female with the same deformity in her leg that Virginia had, but after being examined in Austin, they were found to belong to someone else after the dental records came back as a negative match. 39 years later, a man came forward to tell investigators that he had information on Virginia's case. He said that her life had been ended and that he knew who the culprit was, as well as where she had been buried, which was a location on the college's grounds. The area was excavated, but all that was found was a rubber boot and a glove, neither of which belonged to Virginia, and to this day, she has still not been found. Many people believe that Virginia simply decided to start a new life somewhere else, but most believe that she wouldn't just disappear of her own free will, leaving her mother with no answers. Other theories include suggestions that she somehow hit her head, causing her to develop amnesia, and this is why she never found her way home. The prevailing theory, though, is that she was kidnapped by someone at the campus, possibly...
I'm about to say, because hitting your head and making you, like, have amnesia. I mean, we've seen cases of that. We've reacted to the cases of that in this situation. One of the most recent Mr. Baldwin ones was about that. But if you're on campus, you would find yourself. You would know where you were. You would try to get help if you didn't know where you were. You wouldn't just up and leave and then with random people. That's not what people with amnesia would do.
probably the driver of the convertible and that foul play was involved. As with many of these types of cases, this is all mere speculation, and we may never learn what Virginia's fate truly was. Number 2. It's often the case that someone acts out of character in the days or weeks leading up to their disappearance. Sometimes this is caused by stressful circumstances in their daily lives, work pressure, or trouble with their relationship, and it's often cited as a major contributor in their cases. This type of behavior was also noted as important in the bizarre disappearance of a woman called Patricia Meehan. Patricia grew up in Pittsburgh, where she was born in 1951, and she had an unremarkable childhood. After graduating from high school, she would move to Oklahoma City, where she attended college as she was interested in working as a daycare professional. She dropped out of college though, after which she started working as a ranch hand in Bozeman, Montana. In 1989 though, Patricia decided that she wanted to move back to Pittsburgh, and she contacted her father to tell him about her plans. She said that she found the work in Bozeman to be too stressful, but she didn't go into any further detail. Her landlord would also tell investigators that she'd been acting out of character the last time that he saw her, stating that while she was usually a quiet and shy person, on that occasion she seemed hyperactive, and although he thought it to be strange, he didn't think too much of it. A day after talking to her father, Patricia was driving along northwest on Highway 200 near Circle, Montana, when she seemingly lost control of her car and veered across the road violently, nearly hitting a car containing a woman named Peggy Bueller and her father. Unfortunately, she failed to avoid the collision with the car behind them, which was being driven by Carol Heights, a police dispatcher, but luckily no one came to any harm as the result of the accident. After witnessing the collision, Peggy and her father pulled over in case they needed to provide details to the police, and as Carol exited her car, she saw that Patricia was in the process of getting out of hers as well. But she noticed that Patricia seemed to be dazed, seemingly not realizing that there were other people present. Everyone expected Patricia to wait by her car until the police arrived, but to their surprise, she walked to a nearby fence, climbed over it, and continued walking into a nearby field, after giving only a passing glance to her wrecked car. Peggy decided to contact the police, and by the time they arrived at the scene, Patricia had still not returned. It became a matter of urgency since Patricia was now a suspect that had fled from the scene of an accident, and her car's license plate was checked. Investigators started a search of the field into which she had disappeared, but their efforts were in vain as Patricia was nowhere to be found, despite following her footprints into nearby bushes where they disappeared. The following day, Patricia's family traveled to the scene of the accident to aid in the search by handing out flyers containing Patricia's photo and searching the surrounding area as thoroughly as they could with the help of police search teams. Volunteers from the surrounding community also helped with the search efforts, which were being conducted not only on foot, but also with the help of ATVs, helicopters, and officers on horseback. But again, their efforts proved fruitless. Patricia
To think that this girl just swerved off the road, got into a crash, which probably could cause her to have head, damage, depending how bad the crash was. But then to think she just got up, climbed over a fence and left the crash site and just has never been seen again. That is very weird. That's bizarre. I don't know what the heck happened there.
Patricia's family and the investigators were at a loss as to why she was driving on this road, since it's over 400 miles from her hometown of Bozeman, and there had been no indication from her that she would be traveling this far. The best that anyone could do was speculate, and it was theorized that she may have walked to another road and hitchhiked out of the area before the searches were started. Another possibility is that she hid inside a hay delivery truck that had been parked nearby, and she either left the town in the truck or later snuck out and hitchhiked somewhere else. Strangely, no one other than the motorists involved in the accident saw Patricia in the hours after the crash, which is truly inexplicable. However, soon after news of her disappearance broke, investigators were inundated with calls from people who claimed to have seen her. Literally thousands of leads came in, one of which came from a police officer in Laverne, Minnesota, who reported seeing Patricia walking from a restaurant to another restaurant, ordering nothing but water at each one. Many people also reported seeing her at truck stops between Montana and Seattle. But investigators found that the woman in question had left the area by the time they responded, usually by hitchhiking. Strangely, Patricia was also spotted back in Bozeman by a waitress who stated that she was acting strangely. She demanded to be served quickly, and when the waitress asked her if she had to get back to work, she replied that she was simply going shopping, leaving the waitress wondering why she was in such a rush to finish her breakfast. Another waitress at the restaurant told investigators that Patricia was talking to herself, and that she seemed disconnected from the world around her. Despite insisting that she was in a hurry, she spent nearly 90 minutes in the restaurant.
Interesting. So she was going on about how much of in a hurry she was, but then she like stayed there for so long, almost like she was oblivious to the world around her and what was actually going on. That would make me concerned about the person themselves.
Staring out of the window for most of that time. At one point, she was seen by a truck driver in Washington who said that she was walking next to the road and he stopped to offer her a ride, but she declined. Shortly after that, a woman also saw her and pulled off in her car to ask if she was all right. But the woman thought to be Patricia told her that she was looking for a phone since her car had broken down, but that she would be fine. Despite thousands of leads that were followed in Patricia's case, not a single further clue has ever been found, and she remains a missing person to this day. Number 1. When we think of missing person cases, the last image that comes to mind is that of a 1700s pirate. But that's exactly what happened with Henry Avery, who went missing in 1695. It's believed that Avery was born in or near Devon, England in 1659, though some records date his birth as late as 1665. And being accustomed to the ocean thanks to his father who served in the Royal Navy, his first job was serving on a merchant vessel. Some records show that Avery then joined the Royal Navy, though this is disputed, but it's believed that it's during this time that he acquired a taste for piracy. He was soon given the ironic nickname Long John, which was the exact opposite of his physical appearance, since he was described as being of average height and overweight. After leaving the Royal Navy, Avery...
I'll probably just a rib on him. Saw his overweight, average height demeanor. I was like, look, it's Long John. Just a rib him. Wouldn't surprise me.
Avery joined a ship which sought to find and imprison smugglers in the Caribbean Sea, and this is where his true nature came to the fore. While his captain was intoxicated one night, Avery, who served as a second mate, met with about 100 of his fellow sailors, and together they decided to mutiny after they'd grown ever more impatient with their wages not being paid. The mutiny was successful, and Avery was nominated as the ship's new captain. It was renamed from Charles II to Fancy, and the crew decided to set sail for Madagascar. Along the way, they teamed up with 2 other pirate ships, together making up a formidable force. En route to Madagascar, Avery and his companions looted 6 different vessels that they encountered on the open sea while displaying the Jolly Roger on his ship. He eventually arrived in Madagascar, where he went to work on assembling a fleet, and before long, he had an entourage of 6 ships that followed his command. And he didn't have to wait too long before his efforts paid off. In 1695, Avery and his crew encountered the Ganjai Sawai, a ship that belonged to the head of the Mughal Empire of India. But the fight for the Ganjai Sawai's treasures would not be an easy one, since it was being accompanied by a fleet of ships as protection, since it was carrying an unimaginable amount of valuables. One of the ships, the Fateh Mohammed, was the first to fall to Avery's men, and a total of $14 million in today's currency was lost to the pirates. But this was a drop in the bucket compared to what was contained.
That's a drop in the bucket? 14 million in currency was lost to the pirates? I mean, these pirates are doing what they do. They're collecting their money.
Inside the Ganjai Sawai, and Avery set sail in pursuit. Both ships were fitted with cannons, and an almighty battle broke out that lasted more than 2 hours, but Avery's men managed to destroy the Ganjai Sawai's mainsail, and the ship was quickly overrun by the pirates, earning Avery the nickname Arch Pirate. When all was said and done, Avery and his men sailed away with around $95 million worth of treasure.
That man knows what he's doing. This is how piracy is done, my brothers. $95 million worth of treasure this man found by stealing from a ship. That is how it's done, ladies and gentlemen. That is how it's done.
If converted to modern currency, and it was at the time considered to be one of the biggest pirate hauls ever recorded. The ship was found to contain jewelry, gold, silver, spices, silk, and gemstones, everything that a pirate could ever dream of. Each of the men got a fair share of the takings, ensuring that they would never have to work another day in their lives. But that's when things started going downhill. When the emperor, who owned the Ganjai Sawai, got wind of the attack and the amount of money that he had lost, he understandably became enraged and informed the British government that if Every and his men were not brought to justice, he would start imprisoning every British trader in India, and he followed through on his threat. The East India Company responded by placing a $1,000 bounty on the heads of each of Every's men, and the British government added another.
I mean, in fairness, like, what the fuck did the pirates expect? I don't know why the British Army, why the Indian people are going after the British government and get British Army instead of just going specifically after these pirates, because these pirates are just doing their own fucking shit. It's not like the government sent them to do it. I'd say, and technically, probably the British people don't have jurisdiction to go after their shit. To go after the pirates at this point. So yeah, just put the hit on the men, and let the chips fall where they lie.
500 to that total, but search as they might, Every and his men were long gone, reportedly having sailed to the Caribbean, where they all went their separate ways. It's believed that Every set sail for Rhode Island, after which he traveled to Ireland, but this has never been confirmed. Captain William Kidd was tasked with tracking down the pirates, specifically Every, but he failed to do so, and in the end, he decided to abandon his old life for a life of piracy as well. The governor of Jamaica later reported that he was offered a substantial bribe in exchange for a royal pardon of the pirates, but he declined, and Every and his men remained wanted fugitives.
I'll give respect to this. This pirate knows what the hell he was doing. He got out, he stole a bunch of treasure, went on the run, never was found again. This man probably was rich living off his life. No one knew where the hell he was. This guy is brilliant.
In 1698, the British government decided that the pirates would be granted amnesty on the condition that they surrendered themselves to Captain Thomas Warren. But it was specifically mentioned that Every and Kidd were to be excluded, and that they were to be apprehended on sight. There were reports that Every eventually traveled back to England, where he intended to sell a cache of diamonds, but he was outfoxed by a swindler, and he was forced to live a life of poverty in order to keep his identity hidden from the authorities. Most of Every's 113-man crew managed to escape the long arm of the law, but 14 of his men were eventually apprehended, 6 of which were sentenced to be executed. Authorities received many reports that Every had been sighted in England over the years, but he was never apprehended. Following his enormous haul, many other men were inspired by Every, and they left their everyday lives for a life of piracy, believing that they too could stumble upon a great treasure that would secure their financial futures. Many people still consider Every to be the greatest pirate that ever lived, not only because of the treasure that he stole, but because he managed to evade the law for the rest of his life, and we can only speculate where he ended up and what he did with his ill-gotten gains. Thank you guys.
I'll give him that. He's one of, if not the greatest pirate to ever live. 100% deserves that for the amount of stuff he's done and the success he got. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for watching this reaction video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all for the next one.